My phone vibrated, pulling me out of a deep coding session. It was a text from my cousin Michael. "Will reading tomorrow at Davies and Associates. PM. Aunt Carol says not to tell Emily." My stomach dropped. Grandpa Arthur, my rock, my confidant, had passed away just 2 weeks ago. And they were deliberately cutting me out. A second later, another text followed. "Oops, wrong thread. Ignore that, please." But it was too late. The damage was done. Despite the knot of anxiety in my chest, I decided I would go. I had never cared about Grandpa's money, only his love and the legacy of creativity he embodied. But this was an affront to his memory, a blatant disrespect for whatever his final wishes might be. I called in sick to my tech job in Seattle, something I rarely did. I dressed carefully, opting for a simple, professional charcoal gray dress, something that conveyed respect, not desperation. As I drove through the rainy Seattle morning, my hands gripped the steering wheel, my mind replaying every slight, every dismissive remark from my family over the years. This wasn't just about a will. It was about years of being overlooked, undervalued, and outright dismissed. The law office of Davies and Associates occupied the penthouse suite of a sleek, modern skyscraper overlooking Puget Sound. As the elevator doors chimed open, I saw them. Uncle Richard, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, radiating an aura of self-importance. Aunt Carol, her face a carefully constructed mask of concern, but her eyes sharp and calculating. My cousins, Olivia and Michael, fidgeting nervously, trying to project an air of nonchalance. They were already clustered in the waiting area, speaking in hushed, conspiratorial tones. Aunt Carol spotted me first. Her smile faltered, transforming into a tight grimace. "Emily," she announced, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "What are you doing here?" The others turned, their faces a mixture of surprise and open hostility. I lifted my chin, meeting her gaze steadily. "I'm here for Grandpa Arthur's will reading." Uncle Richard stepped forward, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. "Emily, dear, you weren't invited. This is a private family matter." "I am family," I stated simply, my voice unwavering despite the tremor in my hands. "You know what he means," Olivia interjected, her tone sharp. "Family who respected Grandpa's wishes, not someone who tried to take advantage of his good nature." Before I could retort, a door opened, and a kind-faced elderly man with a shock of white hair emerged. It was Mr. Davies, Grandpa's longtime attorney and friend. "Are we all here for the Arthur Maxwell estate?" he asked, his eyes scanning the tense room. "Is there a problem?" Aunt Carol quickly stepped forward, her practiced charm instantly kicking in. "Mr. Davies, there seems to be a slight misunderstanding. Emily wasn't meant to be included in today's reading." Mr. Davies frowned, consulting his clipboard. "Miss Emily Carter, Arthur's granddaughter. Yes, you are definitely supposed to be here. Please, everyone, come in." The conference room was spacious and modern, with panoramic views of the city. I took a seat near the door, acutely aware of every hostile gaze, every whispered comment. She must have found out somehow. Richard is going to be furious after everything she pulled with those blueprints. ... Mr. Davies cleared his throat, bringing the room to order. "Before we begin, I should mention that Arthur was not only my client, but a dear friend for over 40 years. He was very specific about his wishes, and I intend to honor them exactly." He reached for a thick folder, but Aunt Carol interrupted. "Mr. Davies, I feel I should explain the situation with Emily. She wasn't invited today because we've already discussed the distribution of most items. We didn't want to waste your time." My face burned as every eye in the room fixed on me. "We already divided everything," Aunt Carol announced with an air of finality. "You weren't invited for a reason." Mr. Davies looked genuinely puzzled. Then his expression hardened. "I'm afraid there's been a serious misunderstanding, Mrs. Hayes. Nothing should have been distributed yet." He looked directly at me, a flicker of something that looked like approval in his eyes. And as for Ms. Emily Carter not being invited, He opened the folder in front of him and adjusted his glasses. That would be highly irregular, considering the contents of the will. What do you mean? Uncle Richard demanded, his face all ready. Turning a splotchy red dot, Mr. Davies looked up, his expression professionally neutral, but with a hint of satisfaction. I mean, that her name is the only one in the will. The room went deadly silent. It felt as though all the air had been sucked out, leaving us in a vacuum where no one dared to breathe. This was the moment. The quiet gasp, the stunned silence. Their world had just tilted on its axis, and mine was about to begin anew. Growing up as the daughter of Grandpa Arthur's youngest son, David, was a unique experience. While my extended family lived lives defined by sprawling mansions and luxury cars. My father, a quiet history professor at the University of Washington, taught me that true wealth lay in knowledge, creativity, and integrity. My mother, Sarah, a talented freelance graphic designer, reinforced these values, emphasizing the joy of creating something meaningful over simply accumulating possessions. We lived in a modest house in a tree-lined Seattle neighborhood, filled with books, art supplies, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Every Sunday, we would visit Grandpa Arthur's modern masterpiece in Bellevue, sprawling house of glass, steel, and exposed wood that he had designed himself decades ago. It wasn't just a house. It was a living gallery of his architectural genius, filled with unique art pieces, ancient artifacts, and a library that rivaled my father's. Grandpa Arthur was a legend in the architecture world, a visionary who had built a successful firm from the ground up. But unlike his children, Uncle Richard and Aunt Carol, he never flaunted his wealth. He found joy in the process of creation, in the intricate details of a blueprint, in the perfect curve of a cantilevered roof. When I was 15, everything changed. My father, my guiding star, died suddenly of a heart attack. My mother, reeling from the loss, struggled to keep us afloat. It was Grandpa Arthur who stepped in, not with a grand financial gesture, but with quiet, unwavering support. He spent more time with us, inviting me to his studio, showing me his old sketches, talking about the philosophy behind design. "You have your father's mind, Emily," he'd tell me, his eyes twinkling. "You see the beauty in structure, the logic in chaos." His words ignited a spark in me, leading me down the path of software engineering, a field that allowed me to build and create in a different digital realm. My decision to pursue a career in AI and machine learning at a tech startup rather than joining Uncle Richard's architectural firm was met with a mixture of polite condescension and outright bewilderment from my extended family. "But Emily," Uncle Richard once said during a strained Thanksgiving dinner, his gaze sweeping over his opulent dining room, "you could be making real money. Arthur built a legacy. Why waste your talent on coding?" He swirled his expensive single malt, a faint sneer on his face. "Your grandfather could make one call and set you up for life." I simply smiled. "I want to build my own legacy, Uncle Richard. Something new." My cousins, Olivia and Michael, both deeply entrenched in the family's old money Wizola via, pursuing a superficial career as a social media influencer, and Michael, a mediocre real estate agent, found my choice incomprehensible. Olivia, with her perfectly sculpted eyebrows, once genuinely asked, "But don't you want to be seen, to be important?" The idea that I valued intellectual challenge and creating tangible solutions over social status and material possessions was completely alien to them. As Grandpa Arthur aged into his late 80s, his health began to decline. I started visiting him twice a week, bringing him articles about new tech innovations, discussing the latest advancements in AI, and simply sitting with him as he pored over his old blueprints. We'd often spend hours in his vast library, him sharing stories about the architectural giants he admired, me telling him about the algorithms I was trying to optimize. He'd insist on making us his terrible but endearing instant coffee, and we'd laugh as I'd try to discreetly pour it into a potted plant when he wasn't looking. "You've got coffee grounds on your nose again?" he'd chuckle, reaching up with a napkin. Even as his body weakened, his mind remained sharp, his curiosity boundless. During these visits, he would tell me stories about our family history that no one else seemed interested in hearing. How his own grandmother had been one of the first female engineers in the Pacific Northwest, designing bridges during a time when women were rarely acknowledged in such fields. How the family fortune had originally come from her grandfather's innovative designs for modular housing, making quality homes accessible to working-class families. Stories of struggle, perseverance, and ethical dilemmas that humanized our family, beyond the polished facade presented at holiday gatherings. "Remember Emily?" he told me during one such afternoon, his voice raspy but clear. "True value isn't about what you inherit, but what you build with integrity. How they treat others when they think there's nothing to gain. That's the true measure of character." Meanwhile, as Grandpa's health issues became more pronounced, the rest of the family visited only sporadically. Uncle Richard would stop by monthly, spending more time examining the structural integrity of the house and the potential resale value of its contents than genuinely connecting with his father. Aunt Carol would bring expensive, impersonal gifts that Grandpa had no use for, then leave after precisely an hour, always checking her watch. My cousins rarely visited unless there was a holiday, meal involved, or a potential photo opportunity for Olivia's social media. The autumn before Grandpa passed, he gave me a small, worn, leather-bound sketchbook. "This was mine," he said, placing it in my hands. "Inside are some of my earliest ideas. Nothing flashy or particularly valuable to anyone else. It was filled with intricate pen-and-ink sketches of buildings, bridges, and even futuristic cityscapes." "It's beautiful, Grandpa," I said, genuinely touched. "I want you to have it now," he insisted. "The others would just see old paper, but you'll understand their value comes from the dreams they represent." I had no idea then that this small gift would later become a point of contention and a symbol of their true nature. The last conversation I had with Grandpa just a week before he passed still echoes in my mind. He was having a good day, sitting up in his favorite ergonomic chair in his study, surrounded by his books. When I was about to leave, he took my hand with surprising strength. "Emily, I've been watching all of them for years," he said, his blue eyes clear and direct. "I want you to know that I see everything, and soon I'll be making things right." I assumed he was talking about finding peace before his passing, or perhaps mending old family rifts. I had no idea he was planning something that would change all our lives forever. The first major rift in our family happened 3 years ago, when Grandpa was 87. Uncle Richard called a family meeting at Grandpa's house, ostensibly to discuss his long-term care. When I arrived, I found not just family, but also a prominent art dealer and an appraiser waiting in the living room. "We've been discussing selling the Fancett collection," Uncle Richard announced, referring to Grandpa's rare collection of original architectural blueprints by a renowned modernist architect. A collection Grandpa had painstakingly built over decades. It's sitting in the archives most of the year, and the insurance costs are ridiculous. It's time to monetize these assets. I glanced at Grandpa, whose expression was carefully neutral, but I knew him well enough to see the familiar tightness around his jaw. "Has Grandpa agreed to this?" I asked. Uncle Richard waved dismissively. "Father understands it's the practical choice. At his age, he can't appreciate them anymore anyway." "Actually," I interjected, my voice calm but firm, "Grandpa and I were just talking last week about him wanting to digitize the collection so he could share it with Keith university students." The room went silent. Aunt Carol cleared her throat. "Emily, dear, perhaps you misunderstood. Father knows his limitations. This is a business decision." Grandpa finally spoke up, his voice surprisingly strong. "I did say that to Emily. I have no intention of selling my Fancett collection. These aren't just assets. They are a part of architectural history and my personal legacy. The art dealer and appraiser awkwardly excused themselves. Once they left, Uncle Richard turned on me, his face contorted in a sneer. "You always do this," he snapped. "You think you know what's best because you spend more time here, but you don't understand the financial considerations." "What I understand," I replied evenly, "is that Grandpa should make his own decisions about his property, especially something so deeply personal to him." That night, after everyone else had left, Uncle Richard cornered me in the grand hall. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You may think you're special to him, but you're pushing your luck. Don't forget who built this family's wealth, and it certainly wasn't your father, the history professor." The jab about my father stung, but I stood my ground. "This isn't about money, Uncle Richard. It's about respecting Grandpa's wishes and his intellectual property." From that day forward, Uncle Richard began what I can only describe as a calculated campaign against me. It started subtly, snide comments to other family members about how I was manipulating Grandpa, suggestions that I was positioning myself for special treatment in the will. By Christmas that year, it was clear that many in the extended family had turned against me. At the holiday dinner, Aunt Carol accidentally, or so she claimed, forgot to set a place for me at the main table. Cousin Olivia made pointed remarks about social climbers while looking directly at me. Even my mother's brother, Uncle Ben, who had always been kind to me, was noticeably distant. After dinner, I overheard Uncle Richard talking to my cousin Michael. "We need to protect Arthur from Emily's influence. She's got him wrapped around her little finger. And who knows what she's convincing him to do with the estate, especially those valuable antique maps in his study." I tried to address these suspicions directly. I sent emails to my aunts and uncles, explaining that I had no interest in Grandpa's money. That I just wanted his final years to be comfortable and on his terms, surrounded by his passions. The responses were tepid at best. Aunt Carol replied with a curt, "We all want what's best for Father." While others didn't respond at all, the following Easter, the family held a gathering at Uncle Richard's sprawling mansion in the Seattle suburbs. I wasn't invited, but learned about it through social media when Olivia posted photos. In one picture, Grandpa sat in a corner looking frail and somewhat bewildered, surrounded by smiling faces of family members I rarely saw. I called him that. "Evening, did you enjoy the Easter gathering?" I asked carefully. "It was fine," he said, then lowered his voice. "But they played that awful pop music all night, and Richard's house is always so cold. I wish you could have been there." There was a pause. "You weren't invited." The genuine surprise in his voice confirmed my suspicions. He hadn't been told. I was excluded. As Grandpa's health declined more rapidly, the family began actively limiting my access to him. Aunt Carol instituted a visiting schedule that allocated me only 2 hours on Sunday afternoons, claiming it was to avoid tiring. Father out? When I arrived for these visits, I often found a cousin or aunt suddenly deciding to drop in at the same time, making private conversations impossible. In response, I found creative ways to maintain our connection. I would bring my laptop and show Grandpa fascinating documentaries about architecture or new tech innovations. Jessica, the home assistant who genuinely cared for Grandpa, would sometimes call me directly when she thought Grandpa or needed company or was having a particularly good day. The last Christmas before he died, I wasn't invited to the family gathering at all. I received a text from Aunt Carol. "We're keeping the holidays small this year. Father needs rest." Later, I discovered from Jessica that small meant everyone except me. So on Christmas Eve, I dropped off a package with Jessica, Grandpa's favorite artisanal coffee beans, which he preferred over instant. A rare first edition book on modern Japanese architecture I'd found for him, and a digital frame loaded, with photos from his old design projects and family trips to Lake Chelan, when Grandpa passed away in April. I didn't get the news directly from family. Jessica called me in tears from Grandpa's house. By the time I arrived, Uncle Richard and Aunt Carol were already there, speaking with the funeral director about arrangements. "Oh, Emily," Aunt Carol said with artificial sweetness when she saw me, "we were going to call you, of course." The funeral was a parade of family politics. I was seated in the third row, behind extended family members who had seen Grandpa maybe twice in the last decade. I wasn't asked to speak, despite having spent more time with him than anyone in recent years, helping him organize his archives, and simply being present. Uncle Richard delivered a eulogy that focused largely on Grandpa's business acumen and the financial legacy he had left the family. Through it all, I kept thinking about what Grandpa had said about making things right. I had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. 2 weeks after the funeral, was preparing dinner in my small Seattle apartment when my phone pinged with a text message. It was from my cousin Michael, clearly sent to a group by mistake. "Will reading tomorrow at Davy's office. 2 p.m. Aunt Carol says not to tell Emily." I stared at the message, my stomach dropping. A second later, another message followed. "Sorry, wrong thread. Ignore that, please." I sat down at my kitchen table, a cold feeling spreading through me. So this was how it would be. They weren't even going to tell me about the will reading. Whatever inheritance Grandpa may have left me, they were apparently planning to keep me in the dark about it entirely. This was the last straw, the culmination of years of being dismissed, undermined, and disrespected. I couldn't and wouldn't let this stand. "That's impossible," Uncle Richard finally sputtered, his face turning an alarming shade of red. "There must be some mistake." "I assure you there is not," Mr. Davies replied, his tone making it clear he was not a man who made mistakes. "Perhaps it would be best if I simply read the will as Arthur intended." Mr. Davies put on his reading glasses and began in a clear, steady voice. "I, Arthur Maxwell, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all previous wills and codicils." The formal legal language continued for a moment before he reached the critical section. "After careful consideration and observation of my family over these past years, I have come to a decision regarding the distribution of my estate. I hereby bequeath all my property, both real and personal, including but not limited to my primary residence at 145 Evergreen Lane, Bellevue, my vacation property at Lake Chelan, all financial accounts, investments, personal belongings, and my entire collection of architectural archives and intellectual property to my granddaughter, Emily Ann Carter." There was a collective gasp. Olivia dropped her phone, sending it clattering across the polished concrete floor. No one moved to pick it up. "This can't be legal." Uncle Richard roared, slamming his fist on the table. Mr. Davies continued as if he hadn't been interrupted. "I have enclosed a personal letter explaining my decisions, which Mr. Davies will provide to Emily privately. However, I wish to make clear that this decision was made with full awareness and careful consideration." He looked up from the document. "There is more, but perhaps we should address the immediate concerns first." Aunt Carol was crying now, mascara tracking down her cheeks. "After everything we did for him, the constant visits, managing his affairs, maintaining his social standing when he insisted on associating with those eccentric artist types." Michael leaned forward. "We'll contest it." He was clearly not of sound mind. He was obsessed with those old blueprints, barely knew what day it was half the time. Mr. Davies shook his head slightly. "I would advise against that course of action." Arthur anticipated this reaction and took extensive measures to document his mental competence. He underwent comprehensive cognitive evaluations by 3 separate neurologists in the months before his passing, all of whom certified him as fully competent to make these decisions. As the reality sank in, I remembered Grandpa's words. I've been watching all of them for years. He hadn't been making idle conversation. He'd been testing us, observing how we behaved when we thought there was nothing to gain. Mr. Davies reached into his briefcase and removed a sealed envelope. Emily, your grandfather asked me to give you this letter privately. But given the circumstances, you might want to share certain portions with the family. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and began to read silently. My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, then I've moved on to whatever comes next, and you've just discovered that you're my sole heir. I imagine the family is not taking it well. For years, I've watched how each of you behaved around me. Richard visited only when he wanted to discuss monetizing my assets or expanding the firm. Carol came with expensive gifts, but never stayed long enough for a real conversation about my passions. The grandchildren, except for you, called only on birthdays and holidays, and even then, mostly to ask for favors or connections. But you, Emily, you came because you wanted to be with me. You listened to my stories, helped me organize my old blueprints, and treated me like a person, not a bank account waiting to be accessed or a relic to be dusted off. I've been conducting a test these past years. I deliberately mentioned valuable items around different family members to see how they would react. I watched who asked about my health and who asked about my portfolio. I noticed who helped because they cared and who helped because they thought they should. You were the only one who never failed the test. You saw the true value in what I built, not just the monetary worth, with love and complete confidence in you, Grandpa Arthur. I looked up from the letter, tears streaming down my face, to find the room in chaos. Uncle Richard was on his phone, presumably calling his lawyer. Aunt Carol was berating Mr. Davies about undue influence and manipulation. Olivia was sobbing dramatically while Michael stared blankly at the wall. There's something else you should all know, Mr. Davies said loudly, cutting through the noise. Arthur documented everything. He kept meticulous records of visits, conversations, and behaviors. He installed a state-of-the-art security system in his home 2 years ago that tracked who came and went. He saved text messages and emails. He even recorded some conversations, which is legal in Washington as long as one party consents. He opened another folder. Furthermore, Arthur was aware that items had already been removed from his home without his permission. He maintained a complete inventory with photographs of all his possessions. That's ridiculous. Aunt Carol scoffed, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Mr. Davies raised an eyebrow. Then perhaps you can explain why the antique Japanese screen from the main hall is currently displayed in your living room, Mrs. Hayes, or why Arthur's rare first edition of Le Corbusier's Towards a New Architecture was listed for sale online by a dealer connected to Mr. Maxwell last month, or why several valuable sketches from the Lake Chelan property have been photographed in Richard's private office. The color drained from their faces. The will includes a condition, Mr. Davies continued, his voice devoid of emotion. Any items removed from Arthur's properties must be returned within 14 days. Failure to do so will result in legal action, including criminal charges for theft. Uncle Richard finally exploded. This is your doing, he shouted at me, pointing a trembling finger. You manipulated a confused old man. You turned him against his own family. I thought of all the Sunday afternoons I'd spent with Grandpa, talking about sustainable design and the future of smart cities. I thought of the times I'd driven him to his obscure architectural lectures when no one else would take time off work. I thought of the simple joy on his face when I brought him a new type of drawing pen just because it was Tuesday. No, Uncle Richard, I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady. Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing. He always saw things clearly. He built an empire, but he valued integrity above all else. And that's what he left me. The next few weeks were a nightmare. I left Mr. Davies' office that day with Grandpa's letter clutched to my chest and my family's threats echoing in my ears. Uncle Richard's final words to me were, "This isn't over." Not by a long shot. He wasn't lying. The very next morning, my phone began ringing before dawn. First Aunt Carol, then Cousin Olivia, then relatives I barely knew, all demanding explanations. making accusations or attempting to negotiate for items they felt entitled to. I stopped answering unknown numbers, but the voicemails piled up. Emily, this is your Aunt Carol. I expect you to do the right thing here. Your grandfather wasn't thinking clearly. We all know it. Call me back immediately. Hey, it's Michael. Look, I know we haven't been close, but that vintage architectural model was promised to me years ago. I can send you the email where Grandpa mentioned it. Emily, this is Uncle Richard. My lawyer will be contacting you. What you've done is despicable and won't stand up in court. By the end of the week, the harassment had moved online. Livia posted a thinly veiled attack on social media. Amazing how some people can pretend to care about family just to get what they want. True colors always show eventually. Distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly messaging me, either condemning me or trying to establish a friendly connection now that I had inherited wealth. I changed my phone number and locked down my social media accounts. The stress was taking a physical toll. I wasn't sleeping, had constant headaches, and my supervisor at my tech startup noticed I was making small errors I never would have made before. Emily, is everything all right? She asked after I accidentally deleted a critical line of code. This isn't like you. I broke down and told her everything. She immediately insisted I take 2 weeks of personal leave. Your projects need you at your best, she said kindly. Take some time to get your legal affairs in order. During that week, I finally visited Grandpa's house, my house now, according to the will. I used the key I'd had for years and walked into the silent, empty rooms that still smelled faintly of his drafting ink and old paper. But something was wrong. The house felt hollow, with conspicuous empty spaces on walls and shelves. Moving from room to room, I began to realize the extent of what had happened. The antique Japanese screen that had always stood in the main hall, gone. The collection of rare architectural models Grandpa had treasured, several pieces missing. His personal study, usually filled with his unique collection of global architectural books, was noticeably sparse. They had already taken so much. Not just valuable items, but things of purely sentimental value. The hand-drawn family tree he'd meticulously sketched for my dad. The collection of souvenir miniature buildings from his travels with my grandmother. Even the worn leather-bound journal where he had penciled notes about his early designs. I sank onto his favorite armchair, now stripped of the hand-stitched cushion that should have been there, and sobbed until I had no tears left. It wasn't about the monetary value. It was the erasure of his presence. The theft of memories I had hoped to keep close in the back of his hidden study cabinet. I found a small hidden compartment I hadn't known about, after trying several combinations that might be meaningful. To him, my birthday, his company's founding year, I finally used his birth date, and it opened. Inside was a leather-bound journal, several encrypted USB drives, and a note in his distinctive handwriting, for Emily. Use if necessary. Trust only Mr. Davies and Jessica. The journal detailed everything. Every visit, every conversation, every borrowed item that was never returned. He had been documenting the family's behavior for years, creating a record that would be impossible to dispute. The USB drives contained backup copies of emails, high-resolution photographs of his possessions before they went missing, and even audio recordings. One entry from 6 months before his death stood out. Richard visited today, spent 10 minutes asking about my health. Then an hour trying to convince me to streamline my estate by selling the Fansett collection and the Lake Chelan property. When I refused, he became quite irritated and said I was being irrational about depreciating assets. What he doesn't know is that I had the Lake Chelan property reappraised last month. It's worth nearly double what it was when I bought it, due to the new waterfront development. Richard has never understood the difference between price and true value. Another entry was even more telling. Carol brought Olivia for a casual visit today. While Carol kept me occupied in the living room, Olivia disappeared upstairs for nearly 20 minutes. After they left, I checked my antique book collection. As I suspected, my first edition of Towards a New Architecture is now missing. I've updated the inventory and taken photos of the empty space. I wonder if they realize there are cameras in the upstairs hallway now. Discreetly hidden, of course. My little security project has paid off. Armed with this evidence, I contacted Mr. Davies again. I need to fight back, I told him, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and newfound determination. They've already taken so much. Arthur suspected this might happen, he said gravely. He was very thorough in his preparations. I'll connect you with a litigation attorney who specializes in contested wills and estate theft. Her name is Eleanor Vance. She's formidable. Eleanor Vance was indeed formidable. A sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 50s with an impressive track record. She reviewed Grandpa's documentation and immediately began drafting cease and desist letters to everyone who had taken items from the house. This is one of the most well-documented cases I've ever seen, she told me, her eyes gleaming with professional satisfaction. Your grandfather was extraordinarily methodical. He's truly built a fortress of evidence. The legal pushback only intensified the family's campaign against me. Uncle Richard, true to his word, filed a lawsuit contesting the will on grounds of undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. Aunt Carol began calling my colleagues at my tech startup, insinuating that I had neglected projects and manipulated. My grandfather, during his final months, the CEO of my company, called me into his office. Emily, I know these accusations are baseless, he said, looking concerned. But they're becoming disruptive. We've had calls from investors asking questions. My professional reputation, which I had built through years of dedicated work in a competitive field, was being systematically attacked. The stress became so severe that I developed insomnia and started having panic attacks. My doctor prescribed anxiety medication and strongly recommended therapy. Your physical symptoms are a direct result of this ongoing stress, she explained. This level of family conflict creates genuine trauma. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I received an email from a local reporter asking for comment on the Maxwell family estate dispute that has divided one of Seattle's oldest and most prestigious families. Somehow the story had leaked to the press. That night, alone in my apartment with the curtains drawn against the relentless Seattle rain, I hit my lowest point. I seriously considered giving up, signing over the inheritance, selling everything, just to make the nightmare end. I pulled out Grandpa's letter again, seeking comfort in his words, when my phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. Emily, it's Jessica, your grandfather's home assistant. I still have some things he wanted you to have. Personal things I kept safe. Can we meet? The next day, Jessica handed me a small, unassuming box. He made me promise to keep these separate from everything else in the house, she said, her eyes welling up. He said you'd know what to do with them when the time came. Inside the box were more encrypted memory cards and a small digital recorder. When I plugged the first card into my laptop, I found dozens of video files. Grandpa sitting in his favorite study chair, talking directly to the camera in the first video, dated nearly a year before his death. He looked directly into the lens with clear, sharp eyes. My name is Arthur Maxwell. Today is September 15th, and I am recording this of my own free will with full mental capacity, as Mr. Davies can attest. The camera panned to show Mr. Davies sitting nearby, who nodded and stated his name and the date. I want to explain my decisions regarding my will, Grandpa continued, his voice strong and resonant. For years, I have observed my family's behavior. I have tested their character and their motivations, and I have made my decisions accordingly. My legacy is not merely financial. It is a legacy of integrity and vision. I want that legacy to continue with someone who understands its true meaning. He went on to detail specific incidents, dates, and observations that had led to his decision to leave everything to me. His voice was strong, his reasoning clear and specific. There would be no way for anyone to claim he had been confused or manipulated. As I watched video after video, I felt Grandpa's presence wash over me. He hadn't just left me his possessions. He had left me the means to defend his wishes, to protect his true legacy. He had known exactly what would happen and had prepared for it meticulously with the same precision he applied to his architectural blueprints. In the final video, recorded just weeks before his death, he looked more frail, but his eyes were still bright with determination. Emily, if you're watching this, then things have gotten difficult, as I expected they might. Remember what I always told you about standing up for yourself? Sometimes kindness means having the courage to enforce boundaries. I didn't raise you to conform, my dear. I raised you to stand tall, just like me, and I never let anyone diminish my light or exploit my creations. For the first time since the will reading, I felt a spark of my old strength returning. Grandpa had trusted me, not just with his possessions, but with his true legacy, his principles. I couldn't let him down. The next morning, I called Eleanor Vance. I have something you need to see, I told her, and brought over all the videos and recordings. After reviewing them, she leaned back, in her chair with the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. This changes everything, Emily. With this new, undeniable evidence, Eleanor Vance and I developed a comprehensive strategy. First, we filed a formal inventory of all missing items from Grandpa's estate with the probate court, complete with high-resolution photographs and documentation of their current known locations. Then, we sent formal legal demands for the immediate return of every item, with a clear deadline of 7 days, emphasizing that failure to comply would result in criminal charges for theft, not just civil litigation. Simultaneously, Eleanor filed a motion to dismiss Uncle Richard's frivolous lawsuit contesting the will. Attached to the motion were dozens of Grandpa's video exhibits, each meticulously addressing the very claims of undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. No judge in the Commonwealth will rule against your grandfather after seeing these, she assured me, her voice firm. He laid out his reasoning with crystal clarity, anticipating every objection. We also reached out to my tech startup's legal team, providing irrefutable evidence that the accusations against me were part of a targeted harassment and defamation campaign orchestrated by my relatives. They immediately issued cease and desist letters to Uncle Richard and Aunt Carol, threatening legal action if the defamatory calls and online attacks continued. My HR department also released a company-wide statement reiterating their confidence in my professional conduct and warning against external interference for additional support. I contacted Jessica, Grandpa's home assistant, and several of his trusted friends, architects, artists, and scholars who had visited him regularly in his final months. They were more than happy to provide affidavits about the frequency of my visits compared to the rest of the family, and about Grandpa's consistent mental sharpness. Emily was here at least twice a week, confirmed Dr. Eris Thorne, a retired professor of architectural history and one of Grandpa's closest friends. Sometimes Richard would go a month without showing up, then spend the whole visit trying to convince Arthur to sell off some asset or another. Arthur often complained to me about it. Jessica provided a detailed calendar she had meticulously kept of all visitors, showing that I had visited Grandpa 78 times in his final year, while Uncle Richard had visited a mere 9 times and Aunt Carol 11 times. My cousins had each visited only on holidays, mostly for photo opportunities. We also obtained financial records from Grandpa's private accounts and the family architectural firm. These records unequivocally showed that Uncle Richard had borrowed substantial sums from Grandpa over the years, often for business expansion that never materialized without repayment. Furthermore, Aunt Carol had charged numerous personal expenses, luxury vacations, designer clothing, private school tuition for Michael to Grandpa's accounts under the guise of estate management or care expenses. The scale of their financial exploitation was staggering, totaling nearly $1 million. Armed with this mountain of evidence, Eleanor suggested we call a family meeting at her office. Sometimes showing your full hand at once can avoid months of unnecessary litigation and public embarrassment, she explained. They need to understand the full weight of what they're up against. The day of the meeting, I arrived early, my stomach in knots despite our undeniably strong position. One by one, they filed in. Uncle Richard, flanked by his nervous-looking attorney who kept checking his watch. Aunt Carol, her face pale and drawn, refusing to meet my eyes. Cousins Olivia and Michael both trying to affect bored expressions that couldn't quite hide their obvious anxiety. "Thank you all for coming," Eleanor began once everyone was seated, her voice calm and authoritative. "We've asked for this meeting to resolve some outstanding issues regarding Arthur Maxwell's estate." Uncle Richard's attorney immediately launched into a prepared statement about significant concerns regarding undue influence and questions about testamentary capacity. Eleanor let him finish, her expression unreadable, before responding. "Before we proceed further, there are some materials I think everyone should review." She pressed a button on a remote, and the large screen on the wall came to life with Grandpa's face. "My name is Arthur Maxwell." His clear, resonant voice filled the room. "Today is September 15th, and I am recording this of my own free will with full mental capacity, as Mr. Davies can attest." As the video played, I watched my family's faces. Uncle Richard grew increasingly pale, his jaw tightening. Aunt Carol's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. Olivia began to cry silently, her perfectly applied makeup streaking. Michael stared at the screen as if mesmerized by a ghost. When the video ended, Eleanor simply said, "There are 42 more videos like this one, each addressing specific incidents, decisions, observations Arthur made about his family and the handling of his assets." Arthur Maxwell was perhaps the most thorough client I have ever encountered. He left nothing to chance. She changed the screen to show a complex spreadsheet. "This is the current inventory of items removed from Arthur's properties without permission. Next to each item is its original location, detailed documentation of its removal, and its approximate value for insurance purposes. The total currently stands at just over $750,000 in physical assets alone." The room was deadly silent. "Ms. Carter is prepared to file criminal charges for theft if these items are not returned within 7 days. Eleanor continued, her voice matter-of-fact. "Additionally, we have comprehensive documentation of financial exploitation, including unreported loans and unauthorized withdrawals, totaling nearly $1 million. This information could be of significant interest to the district attorney's office and the IRS." Uncle Richard's attorney leaned over and whispered urgently in his ear. Richard's face was a mask of defeat. After a moment, he cleared his throat. "Perhaps we've all been hasty. Emotions run high after a loss like this, especially when there's money involved." I couldn't help but add quietly, "and perhaps when there's a legacy at stake." The meeting ended with Uncle Richard's attorney requesting time to review the overwhelming evidence and advise his client. 2 days later, he called Eleanor Vance to inform her that they would be withdrawing their lawsuit contesting the will. Within a week, items began appearing on Grandpa's porch, delivered by anonymous moving companies rather than returned in person. The rare books came back via courier, each piece carefully packaged. No notes, no apologies. But at least they were complying. I hadn't expected to hear directly from any of them, so I was surprised when Aunt Carol called me directly. "Emily," she said, her voice lacking its usual sharpness. We didn't realize how much these past years meant to Father. We thought we were protecting him. You never asked." I replied simply. There was a long pause. "We thought you were taking advantage of him," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "We didn't understand why he preferred your company so much, because I saw him as a person, Aunt Carol, not a balance sheet or a source of connections." Another long pause. "Some of us would like to talk," she finally said. "To explain, maybe even to apologize. Perhaps to understand." I considered her words. I'm willing to listen, Aunt Carol, but I need time. A lot of time. After we hung up, I sat in Grandpa's living room, truly my living room now, surrounded by the returned items that carried his memory. The victories of the past weeks felt hollow in some ways. I had the house, the possessions, the legal validation, but I'd lost what remained of my immediate family in the process. The empire of lies had crumbled, but it had left a crater where family once stood. The next day, I took action. I called each family member individually, offering them the opportunity to select one sentimental item from Grandpa's belongings. Not the most valuable things, but something meaningful to remember him by. Something that represented a positive shared memory. Some declined, still too proud or angry. But Olivia surprised me by asking for Grandpa's worn-out copy of The Fountainhead, the book that first sparked his passion for architecture. He taught me about artistic integrity once, she admitted, her voice soft. It's one of my few good memories with him, before. Okay? Everything. Michael requested Grandpa's old drafting compass set, the one he said Grandpa let him play with as a little boy, before he started being a good little businessman. Uncle Richard predictably declined my offer, stating, I want nothing from that house now, but Aunt Carol asked for one of Grandpa's small watercolor landscape sketches. Simple rendering of the Lake Chelan property at sunrise. He painted it the summer before he started his firm, she told me, a flicker of genuine sentiment in her eyes. I always admired it. These small connections didn't heal the deep wounds that had been inflicted, but they were a start, a fragile recognition that Grandpa had been more than his wealth or his firm. He had been a person who touched all our lives in different ways, and his true legacy was far more complex than the material possessions they had fought over. The court officially closed the case the following month, confirming me as the sole heir and legal owner of all Grandpa's properties and possessions. The victory was complete, but complicated by the knowledge that relationships had been irreparably damaged. As I stood on the sprawling deck of Grandpa's house, now my house, watching the sunset over the Puget Sound, I thought about how he would feel about all that had happened, the ugliness, the accusations, the greed, but also the final honoring of his wishes. You did good, Grandpa, I whispered to the evening air. You saw us all clearly, even when we couldn't see ourselves. 6 months after the will reading that changed everything, I sat in Grandpa Arthur's private study, now my sanctuary. Watching the Seattle rain fall steadily outside, the property had transformed in subtle ways. I'd kept the minimalist character and innovative spirit he had cultivated, but added touches that reflected my own personality. New ergonomic workstations for my coding projects, a small meditation corner overlooking the garden, wind chimes that sang softly on the patio. The house no longer felt haunted by conflict, to become a vibrant space again, just as it had been when Grandpa was alive, buzzing with creativity and quiet reflection. I'd taken a sabbatical from my tech job to focus on settling the estate and determining my path forward. The inheritance had given me options I'd never imagined having, but also responsibilities I was still learning to navigate. One rainy afternoon, while organizing Grandpa's meticulously labeled digital archives, I found an encrypted folder I had somehow missed during previous cleanings. It was addressed simply, "For Emily, after everything is settled." Inside was a handwritten letter on Grandpa's distinctive embossed stationery. My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, then the storm has passed. Knowing our family, it was likely a Category 5 hurricane, but I had complete faith in your strength and resilience. I need to explain something I couldn't put in my official documents. This inheritance was never about punishing the others, though I'm sure that's how they saw it. It was about recognizing the heart that beats so strongly in you. The same heart your father David inherited. Money changes people. Emily, I've watched it happen throughout my life, especially in our family. It can bring out selfishness, entitlement, and cruelty. But occasionally, very occasionally, it finds its way to someone who understands its true purpose. To create security that allows for generosity. Build a future, not just hoard the past. I chose you not because you were perfect or because you never disappointed me. I chose you because when you made mistakes, you owned them. When you disagreed with me, you did so respectfully, always with logic and conviction. When you helped me, whether it was organizing my blueprints or just listening to my old stories, you did it without expectation of reward. The others will claim I was manipulated or confused, but the truth is simpler. I wanted my legacy in the hands of someone who would honor its spirit, the spirit of innovation, integrity, and contribution, not just preserve its monetary value. Now, some advice from beyond. Don't let this wealth change who you are. Use it to become more authentically yourself. Take that architectural tour of Europe we always talked about. Fund that sustainable urban development project you dreamed of creating. Keep the Lake Chelan house in the family. Someday you might have children who will love it as we did. And perhaps, when wounds have healed enough, find ways to include the family again. Not because they deserve it, but because connection matters. And true family is built on more than blood. Set boundaries. Certainly, I wasn't raised to be a pushover, and neither were you, but leave room for growth and reconciliation. I love you, my dear girl. I'm so proud of the woman you've died. I'm so proud of the woman you've died. Look at this. Look at this. And we all know, look at this. And we all know I've been exploring that, not we are at one. And we all know I've been exploring that. You know what? My save ride, but love with seasons, to leave me at we'd be so alive. My love of you, my delight lies. Quite, why. We, to kide we sive with all like with phase you was kind with say to love to kado we love with kakat ekfi to come side to me at kalev with it to become Grandpa Arthur. Tears streamed down my face as I read and reread his words. Even now he was guiding me, offering wisdom and permission to forge my own path forward. Not just as an heir, but as a person who understood the deeper meaning of legacy. In the weeks that followed, I began implementing his suggestions. I established the Arthur Maxwell Legacy Fund at the University of Washington's College of Built Environments, specifically for students interested in sustainable architecture and urban planning. I started the paperwork to create a nonprofit foundation focused on preserving historical architectural landmarks in the Pacific Northwest. People who, unlike Grandpa, didn't have anyone to advocate for their lasting impact. I took that architectural tour of Europe, visiting the iconic buildings and urban spaces we had discussed for so many years, feeling a profound connection to his vision and our shared passion for design. As for the family themselves, healing came in small, unexpected moments. Cousin Olivia reached out first, asking if we could meet for coffee. She brought her sketchbook, filled with her own surprisingly intricate designs for sustainable fashion. I want to learn about the tech side of things, Emily, she admitted awkwardly. How to build something real, something that lasts, not just fleeting trends. Would you be willing to share some of your knowledge with me someday? Michael invited me to his small, intimate wedding, though I suspected his new wife, a kind and grounded woman, had insisted. Still, when I attended, he made a point of introducing me to everyone as my cousin Emily, who runs the Arthur Maxwell Legacy Fund. It wasn't warm, but it was acknowledgement. Aunt Carol remained distant, but sent a Christmas card with a brief note. Your grandfather would be proud of what you're doing with the foundation. It shows you truly understand his vision. Coming from her, it was practically an olive branch. Uncle Richard never came around. Some wounds run too deep, some pride too rigid to bend. I made peace with that reality while leaving the door open. Should he ever change his mind, the greatest healing came through an unexpected connection. During one of the Legacy Fund's early events, I met Grandpa's niece, Maria, my father's cousin, who'd moved to Portland decades ago. She'd lost touch with the family, but had fond memories of Grandpa and my father. David was the best of us, she told me over dinner. He chose intellect over money, substance over status. Arthur adored him for living authentically. Through Maria, I discovered a branch of the family untainted by the inheritance battle, second and third cousins, who shared stories and photographs I'd never seen. Expanding my understanding of our family history beyond the narrow narrative I'd grown up with. 1 year after Grandpa's passing, I hosted a memorial dinner at the house. I invited only those who had genuinely cared for him, Jessica and other caregivers, Mr. Davies, a few neighbors who had been true friends, Maria and her family, and yes, even Olivia and Michael. We shared stories, laughter, and a few tears, creating the kind of gathering Grandpa would have loved, as everyone mingled in the garden afterward. Mr. Davies approached me with a glass of Grandpa's favorite obscure French wine. "You know," he said quietly, "I've handled hundreds of estates over my career, seen families torn apart and relationships destroyed over far less than what was at stake here. I'm not sure our family fared much better," I admitted. He shook his head. "You misunderstand me, Emily. The miracle isn't that some relationships survived. It's that you remained true to yourself throughout." Arthur told me once that his greatest achievement wasn't his wealth or status, but raising a son who valued integrity enough to pass it to his daughter. You are living proof of his true legacy. I looked around at the gathering, not the family I had expected to have, but a chosen family, bound by genuine love and respect for Grandpa Arthur. On the mantel inside, his photograph watched over us all, his slight smile seeming to say he had known how everything would unfold. Inheritance had cost me relationships, but had given me something far more valuable: the freedom to live by my own values. Just as my father had done, just as Grandpa had taught me. I understood now that this had been his true bequest, not the house or the money or the blueprints, but the courage to stand firm in my truth, and to use what I had been given to build a better future. As the evening ended and guests departed, I stood on the porch watching the city lights twinkle in the summer twilight. "We did it, Grandpa," I whispered. "We made things right. Your legacy will shine brighter than ever." Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family pressure or betrayal? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more tales of family dynamics, unexpected inheritances, and finding strength in difficult situations. Remember that sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't measured in dollars, but in the lessons and love we carry forward. Thank you for listening to my story today. May you always find the courage to honor your own truth, just as my Grandpa Arthur taught.